Welcome to the MIT IT Innovation Program podcast. This is a repository of insights by thought leaders and practitioners of innovation where they speak about their views, insights, and experiences. Come join us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, New Data for New Innovations. My name is Priya Dhawan, and I contribute as the Head of Collaborations, Branding, and Outreach to the MIT ID Innovation Program. This is our sixth webinar since lockdown started, and I'm grateful to be amongst you all hosting this informational session today. I'm pleased to introduce our guest speaker, Mr. Bhushan Patil, founder of Multiply Ventures. Bhushan is an IIT Mumbai alumni with 21 years of product and business leadership experience. Recently worked as president at Paytm and Paytm Mall. He was also the director for international business at Alibaba in China and earlier led product and business roles at Zapak, Yahoo, Talisma, and Vendio. He has experience of working in various international and Indian markets, building consumer businesses, raising funds, and global partnerships. At Multiply Ventures, they have over 30 plus early stage investments made in the last 2 years, and many of them have raised their subsequent rounds. Their portfolio companies will not only have access to capital, but also some of the best execution minds in the industry and access to over 300 million Indian consumers and 10 million small and medium-sized businesses through ecosystem partners. Apart from their three focus sectors, fintech, edutech, retail tech, they're always open to back great Indian innovations, which has the potential to be large, impactful companies of the future. While the Indian market offers a great opportunity in terms of size, it's also one of the most diverse, heterogeneous, and complex markets to scale. With a new world order evolving comes new data, leading to new innovations using that data. So before we proceed to listen to Bhushan, I have a few updates to share about the session and the MIT ID Innovation Program webinar platform. Firstly, today's webinar will have the speaker share his insights for the first half an hour, followed by questions as we move along. Request you all to share your questions once they are set to the chat mode to everyone. The webinar will be available after the session on our various social channels, and future webinars will be accessible through the same link that you are using right now. We'd like to encourage you to share today's webinar and its learnings with your social networks. This curated series on innovations, which will feature a variety of industry thought leaders, speakers like Mr. Bhushan Patil, who are a part of the MIT ID innovation ecosystem. For those who are not aware, MIT stands for the 4-decade-old Maharashtra Institute of Technology. ID stands for MIT's 15-year-old Institute of Design. And the one-year innovation program is the latest offering of MIT ID, which aims to create a new breed of comprehensive innovators. Those who are informed by design thinking, influenced by future technologies and trends, and inspired to make their own mark in the global, political, social, economic, and technological scenario. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome our speaker, Mr. Bhushan Patil.
Thanks a lot for having me on this session. It's always good to connect with innovators, and because that's not just part of our day-to-day job, but it's also like as a business, we want to invest in new innovations. And this kind of series definitely helps us actually foster that innovation, because a lot of Indian innovators have great ideas, but they just need some platforms to kind of create these innovations and then scale it from there. We definitely help as you rightly pointed before, we definitely help the good innovations to be backed by money, but at the same time, the ecosystem access. However, today I'm going to touch more about the data aspect and how data plays an important role. And it starts very early in the innovation cycle, even to understand basically what we're doing, right? So So hopefully, I think everybody can hear me. Assuming that, I'm going to start my session today. It's new data for new innovations. As you know, they call nowadays data is a new oil, right? And obviously, we see already oil prices are falling down across the country, world, but data is a big thing. In fact, even in current times, everybody is looking for data. Even the current times, look at the COVID model. Everybody's looking for how far is the next COVID patient next to me, how many numbers are affected, what are the percentage of death rates, etc. So what is happening, really speaking, and the same thing goes for innovation also. Even today, like we are supporting. So I was saying that they all say that data is a new oil, and we already seen falling oil prices now. Data is becoming more important. Even in the current pandemic times, data is playing an important role. And same thing is happening, like some of the innovations which we are looking at right now. There are interesting innovations happening across India to take on this pandemic. And everybody is also not just creating innovation, but then they are looking for a lot of data to support the innovations, either for manufacturing those innovations or pushing those innovations to the consumers, etc. With this, let me just kind of give an overview of what is the transition of data, which we are seeing right now. And I'm just going to my slide 2 here. So I really call in my presentation is data 1.0 and data 2.0. And I think a lot of innovations and products, applications, be it physical products or even online products, digital products. Traditionally, what has happened, and assuming there are many students in the current, I think, session, I want to touch upon what is the traditional data, and that's called, I'm defining it as data 1.0. So if I look at data on various aspects like source, size, usage, context, there's a clear-cut different differentiation between what we used to basically refer as data or what are the sources of data. A lot of things are changing. So for example, if let's say we are looking at, let's say, designing a car or designing a washing machine or innovations for, let's say, consumers, let's say maybe even like websites, etc. What used to happen, and a lot of academics today is also relates to that very well, is if I look at the source of data, specifically about consumers, distribution chain, feedback. For an example is like if I'm defining or creating a new innovative, let's say, consumer product, let's say roti maker, which is late product. I might have looked at consumer trends, maybe look at distribution, same thing on usage. And when typically what really happened, the data usage in the innovation cycles were like more to do with the pre-product cycles. So lots of data people and innovators used to basically refer to in a pre-product phase. So for example, what feature I should build in my product, or which innovation might work better. What should I prioritize? Let's say if I'm putting, let's say, a website, what is that first icon on my website should be? In the file menu, what should be my first action, right? A lot of it was defined and is defined pre-product phase. And the context was always in a product. So a lot of data was defining, okay, what is my product looking like, right? And that is what I'm referring as, just to give a context of people who might have joined before. It's like the traditional data models. And a lot of the data which we're picking up that time is a direct data. So if I'm defining let's say, innovating a new website, new application, or a new physical product, I would ask direct question to my consumer saying that, would you use this product? Or in this product, what are the best feature you want to pick up, right? And so that I can define my modules or prioritization of features, buttons, etc., or interactions of the innovations with the consumers. Processing, as we talked earlier, it's simple and manual. It was easy to process the data, which is like a physically you can put in one particular structure. And again, the data decisions. So like what were the most of data decisions that time were very direct. So for example, the data will precisely tell you, should you make a, let's say if I'm just taking a weird example, like let's say washing machine for that matter. You know what is the capacity of washing machine I should be building for India, right? Let's say it should be a 15-liter washing machine, 20-liter washing machine, something like that. Or even to an extent that what should be the first function button on washing machine, right? So very specific and precise data we used to typically pick up. And a lot of it is used in a pre-product model. But if you look at the dynamics across this axis, what you see here from source to data decisions really changes in the new model. And we'll look at some of the examples later on, but I think this is to just set the context right. If you look at nowadays, the data is almost everywhere, right? Source of data is not just consumers and distribution networks, is also about products. So for example, let's say I'm creating a new innovation. Let's say I'm creating a website, simple website, let's say for a blog for that matter. Like the simple innovation I just want to put on, let's say blog on, let's say design, or blog on innovation. What really happens is you might get started with certain data, but the product itself will give you feedback about a lot more data. So you might get traffic trends on your blog. You will get data, which consumers are coming, which groups, age groups of consumers are coming. So you suddenly have a new dimension of data coming from product itself. And then products are also taking a different form, because now suddenly, if let's say after launching this blog about innovations, you might find that a lot of readers are coming from XY, let's say a particular age group. You might change the content of that blog, or you might change the interaction of the consumers, or you might even say that maybe my target was supposed to be only entrepreneurs. So you might change the content so that you rightly target the product. So the data would possibly come from product itself. And Amazon Alexa is a good example. The Alexa feeds back a lot more data to the ecosystem back, so that next time when you say play a song, it plays a song matches to your mood. And that will change consumer to consumer also. The second is massive consumer. So earlier we look at consumer data in a very sample or a deep stick model. Today, it's possible to get mass consumer data, which is even, for example, if we are running, let's say, larger platforms like Netflix and some of these platforms, or even, let's say, simple innovations like, let's say, an IoT device, I'm creating, let's say, air conditioner, which goes to, let's say, few tens of thousands of users. I can actually get that entire data back and get the consumer connected data from a behavior perspective, their consumption perspective, the time of day they use my product, etc. So suddenly what happens, the data size, as well as the consumer from whom we get data, suddenly becomes very massive. Another thing is indirect data. A lot of times, I think if you look at right now, or many times in recent past, if you look at, the non-incumbents are actually creating new innovations. So it is not that because a banker, I was in a bank for the last 15 years, so that's why I'm the only person who can possibly create a good fintech company next. Or you don't need to be like working in a Ford and General Motors, etc., to come out with a Tesla as a model, because the Tesla guy possibly didn't have any exposure from a vehicle perspective because he ran other online companies before. So what really is happening is a lot of indirect data is defining various innovations. So you might look at, let's say, nanotechnology, which typically was physics and chemistry, coming into, let's say, agriculture today, right? Because you just extrapolated data. So a lot of indirect data is driving new trends and new innovations. And this becomes very important because some of this data might even make some of the traditional industries irrelevant. So this, again, we are going to look at the indirect data to some extent as we go along in the presentation, and definitely product feedback, because it constantly you're getting the feedback. Like I can even look at, in some cases, in many products today, especially digital products, I as an innovator can know how many people right now are using my product, how many people are right now using my product, and for what. Are they talking about COVID or not COVID, right? So a lot of this product feedback and continuous feedback is coming right now compared to the traditional models where only my marketing teams, my sales force, as well as my survey forms, etc., get my feedback. So if you look at the source of data, suddenly has become very massive. That leads to size issues, like the data is enormous. And this actually poses challenges for innovators because there is unlimited data almost for all the sectors right now. Maybe 10, 15 years back, it was a case like, for example, if you have to come out electric vehicles, you may have few books and few data to kind of manage. But today, you just have so much data, and a lot of it is valid and something is also invalid, right? So data sizes and enormous. I think that creates another good news, but as well as there are challenges. And also the usage, right? So you don't use nowadays the data in innovations only in a pre-product phase or pre-innovation phase. You use it across the life cycle. And I'll touch upon a couple of examples also on this, because it's not, your innovation is not only related to product today. You might have a great product. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely audible. Please carry on.
Great. Yeah. So as I'm saying, that the usage of data also has changed. It has gone from pre-product to the entire supply chain or life cycle of a product. So you might have as innovation, data can define what product, how the product should look like, and how product should function. But even beyond that, you can actually leverage the data even to decide how I'm going to distribute my product, which customer I'm going to distribute. At the same time, maybe the service aspect, maybe if the product is talking back to you, let's say, for example, these connected IoT devices, maybe your service provider or the innovator of that particular product knows at point remotely, sitting remotely because of data, that, you know what, out of these 100 customers who bought my product, this 7th customer needs a repair because one of the components is not working. He can find it remotely. So the entire, I would say, building of product, distribution of products, sales cycle of products, service aspects of product, and also the post-products, life cycles, etc., are interestingly connected through data. And that also gives you more opportunities, because now, because the data is available throughout the life cycle of product, the innovations can go further down than just creation of innovation. It also touches upon the other aspects of innovation, what you typically do. Context, obviously, as to simply just say that earlier data was related to the product. So you try to create an innovation based on product, but now it's not just product, but also services related to that can be controlled through, you can actually innovate all these things together with the product, and again, backed by the data. As I said, the types could be direct and indirect. There are two definite types. Processing, obviously, because the data becomes enormous, there are multiple sources, there is lots of fake and good data available. You can slice and dice the data in different models. You need different kind of tools. And that's where I think some of the, I would definitely urge a lot of innovators, many innovators, to kind of go through these models, data models, AI models, etc., to understand how you can process this data. Many times, otherwise, what happens is you have enough data, now you don't know how to process it. And there are also some of the aspects of cloud, etc., which comes into picture. Data decisions right now, if you look at earlier, as we talked, it was giving you a precise direction, like I should make a washing machine of 20 liters. I should put a button of power on the left-hand side or right-hand side. The next button should be programs of, let's say, woolen, silk, whatever it is. Whereas nowadays the data is, because the data sizes are more, you might not get a precise decision, but you will get some trends, or the data is becoming a little bit fuzzy. And sometimes it is also not humanly possible for us to process or find the trend or insight in data. And that's where the self-learning models come into picture. And there are some interesting case studies done of various products, like people don't know that particular trend, but when they put into the data, they just find this particular product is doing very well. And a good example of that is, I would say, a stock market. Like 15, 20 years back, a lot of it was driven by people. Like people would know, some people based on industry sector expertise would know this particular stock might do well. Or you would go to an expert of a, let's say, FMCG expert to figure out, okay, what kind of food is working good in India. Or you might go to the best of the website designers to find out what is working, which website design works better, etc. But today, what is happening right now is there are a lot of these self-learning models. So what is happening is, and the best example, if I said stock market, because last 15, 20 years, what really has happened is a lot of these algorithms are actually telling you what stocks to buy. And these algorithms are performing much better than a human intervention or human powered data decisions. And that's why, again, I would, as an innovator, you have to really look at that. Yes, you might have certain decisions made, but can you pick up a self-learning models in your innovations so that maybe there are multiple interesting use cases possible? For example, I think there are interesting things like when Amazon Alexa came in, right? they just thought that people would use it for entertainment purposes mainly. But later on, they just found various use cases from a data pattern perspective that during morning times or afternoon times, a lot of kids asked about homework. How should I solve this mathematical problem? Or housewives started asking, how do I cook certain thing, right? So it becomes like a self-learning, kind of I would say, self-building kind of mechanisms or self-building innovations. So innovation plus kind of model. So you might have go with a basic innovation, but your innovation might become like a snowball to create a larger ecosystem around it because of self-learning models. So I think that's one just to set you the context from what I call it as a new data and what is a traditional data. A lot of our academics today talks about the data 1.0, whereas if you look at industry right now is already following data 2.0, and we're going to see some examples of this as we go along here. So going further, and here's an example, right? So, and I've taken a few examples from different industries. So this first is really from a kitchen appliances, right? And everybody would have seen like this traditional devices in most of our homes today, like toasters, stirrers, microwave ovens, etc. And that's a traditional data 1.0 design products. But what really happens right now with IoT coming into picture, you have this all new connected kitchens, right? Now imagine, let's say some of these products, for example, toaster, or let's say this kettle, which can show you how much water is filled in through that blue color bar. So what really happened is in a physical product world, you actually built a product, but at the same time, possibly also give an interface to the product. Let's say maybe there is a button to kind of switch it on. There is an indicator to say that the food is ready, like microwave oven, etc., and so on and so forth. Whereas what is happening with the new devices now, connected devices, is maybe a lot of your devices do not need a control panel. You can actually assume the control panel is mobile phone itself, right? And that's already happening. For example, if you get a TV today, you might not remote because there are many remote applications available already on mobile phone, and you can connect your TV and operate directly from mobile phone, and multiple people can operate it. So what really is happening, not just the interaction of the product is changing because of this new mechanism, multi-modal or multi-access point mechanisms, but also what is happening right now. Imagine the kind of data the traditional devices, these red color devices, possibly red and white color devices would have given to you versus the bottom half of the right side. Most of these devices actually talk to you as a consumer more interactively. So not in the same content. So I think what is also happening in such kind of innovations or physical product innovations is the innovators. So for example, whoever is, let's say, be a brand like Samsung, Nokia's, or like, let's say Apple's of the world, they get enough information about not just what you talk on the phone, what you chat on WhatsApp, etc., but also the physical products. And this data really helps them find various interesting patterns. So, so just an example, for example, what might happen is if you really have a IoT device, let's say your microwave is connected to a application, and this data is fed, let's say, back to the brand also, because the whole thing happens to the brand IoT cloud. You can actually find out what's cooking in the house in South India versus what's cooking in house at, let's say, North India. Or you can also find out what is the usage of microwave as a device, or a fridge as a device, how much time it is run. Do you have a typical usages? Maybe you'll have lesser usage of microwaves in South India because it's more of a boiled, like idli, dosa, and those kind of fried food, versus maybe North India, etc. So you'll see a lot of patterns of data decisions which innovators can make, even pre as well as post product development, right? So I just put down some aspects here, like the design aspect itself. While designing for a particular innovation, one is because of this entire new model of multi-interaction, multi-modal connectivity, you might want to take certain things for granted. Like maybe you might not want to create a very heavy interaction with a product as a control panel, buttons, and etc. You might just say that there are a few buttons, but I'm okay to kind of pass it on to a mobile phone to kind of manage everything else. Because the power of that is not just you reducing the cost of innovation, but it also gives you flexibility, because what is shown as application mobile can also change. Let's say during a festive time, you can, if not anything, you can change the skin of that mobile application and say that, okay, this is what you should be cooking for. Or maybe through the information which you might want to pass on. Earlier, you will see a lot of booklets. So most of these red products will have booklets, right? Like cooking guides, how to operate, those kind of things. If there is a mobile applications like this, you could possibly do it entire through a digital channel. So entire design aspect of these certain products or such products might change. Second is the service aspect. Now imagine, let's say, in a first scenario, the customer would have called someone, or he would have taken this product to the service center to repair it, because possibly he's the only person at that time knows that, okay, this thing is not working, or it gets overheated, or it's not rotating, or the motor has some problem, etc. And the guy will diagnose later. And a lot of time, the brand for that matter may not even have this data. Or the innovator may not even know, because somebody, local guy, might repair that thing. And that was really happening before also, like traditional home appliances, etc. Once they are distributed to a larger supply chain or a deep supply chains, it's very hard for brands to know, or the innovators to know, what is the real problem with my product. And that's where you used to kind of do consumer studies, etc. But now what really happens is, with this kind of devices into picture, you can actually get the entire data that, you know what, this particular IC keeps failing in my microwave, or let's say my air purifier, etc. So the service aspect becomes very interesting when, and not just becomes interesting, the innovator, for example, if somebody is designing this particular product or innovating certain new innovation for kitchen appliance or kitchen utility, etc., he's not just designing a product, but he can also design for that service aspect, right? Either through the app which is making, that any problem comes, click a button, I'll figure out a diagnostic for you. Or if not anything, he can actually give direct suggestion through a chat or some application. So suddenly what happened, the envelope of design or innovation has gone beyond product or just a simple innovation. It has also touched upon service aspect. Same thing on a post-sale aspect, right? So you might have sold him certain thing, but you might want to say subscription model. So for example, with a toaster, let's say microwave for that matter, throughout a year, I can, almost like a Netflix kind of subscription, which goes on your mobile or a TV, I might actually sell you a food subscription. This is what you should be cooking in the winter time. This is a healthy food, etc. And people might want to buy it. So there is also post-sale kind of innovations possible because of this new connectivity and new data. And data will help you what to kind of push it, because if the guy is not cooking, let's say, rice anytime, then there's no point in pushing rice. So you can personalize a lot of these experiences. You also get a lot of data about usage, who is using the product for what, again, can help you make the innovations better. Product variations, this is another thing, right? Let's say, as we talk, like maybe microwave in South India is used differently versus North India, or versus East or West India, or by states. I would say might be interesting to look at product variations. And that's traditionally also is happening, right? When these white good companies when they design their products, they had these aspects of Indian kitchens or the regional kind of cooking habits, right? So those could be created through data, and obviously interaction, like what kind of interaction I'm going to maintain with my customers. So if you look at this as an industry, let's say kitchen as an industry today, you would definitely see the innovation suddenly started touching not just a design phase, but also service, post-sale usage, product variation, and even the customer interactions. Similarly, if I take another example, let's say audio industry, and this is what I was referring earlier, really what has happened is the entire plethora of all these kind of multi-boxes, remote control, and all these things, and very offline-led products suddenly started becoming online. And even the interaction of the product changes. You don't actually operate the product through a mouse or a keyboard, etc. You actually operate by voice. And that again gives you different type of data coming back to you, definitely as we talk design, usage, etc. But even the form and communications, the form itself changes, right? Imagine, look at the form of, let's say, the earlier ecosystem of music versus the new ecosystem of music. There are no buttons, there are no remote, it just became much smaller, miniature. So the form of the innovation itself is different because somebody just found out. And this is a good example of indirect data also, right? So people just found out maybe people will extend their mobile phones to listen to music, or people may not want only device to only play music. They might want to interact with the music. So there's a lot of indirect data coming from consumer insights, which decides which possibly which we see as an outcome here as Amazon and the Google Echoes, etc. here as a form itself of innovation. Communication, obviously, because this device works on active communication, and again the data, because when the consumer communicates with the device, right, through a voice, you get much more context as data, right? And obviously, but at the same time, if everybody keeps talking to this Amazon and Alexa, etc., it's very hard to process the data. So you need lots of different engines to process the communication data to find out who likes what. And I think there's a lot more interesting patterns, models are happening around data on communications. And that's been happening more and more because people have started already moving from touch, keyboards, mouse, remotes to voice-based interactions. And these interactions will become very interesting from a data perspective as well as input to innovations over a period of time. Then usage wrapping, right? And this is, I'm going to touch upon this a little bit later in, I think, next to next slide. I think usage wrapping is basically this product. Maybe it is more than it's not just a music box. It is and which we can talk to, but it is a multi-usage product. And a lot of times when somebody innovated Alexa as a product, he might not have thought that, okay, you know what, in India people are going to ask him a question like how to make idli, right? So what really is going to happen is, can you create instead of a product? So this is the good product to kind of display as a product becoming platform. So and I think that's what really is happening. And you might have heard as a innovator, a lot of times, most of the industry leaders started calling themselves as, now we are a platform of electric vehicles. We are an ecosystem of electric vehicles. We are just kind of a wrapper for all the financial ecosystems, etc. They are saying that because they don't know what is going to be used in that product. So today, if somebody says Amazon, let's say Alexa is a good music player, it is not a great thing. But if you say it's a home entertainment system, possibly it works better. So products are becoming like platforms, etc. And that's why I'll touch upon usage wrapping. Interconnect with others, obviously, because now the products are not just connected with the intent of it, but it might even operate your household items, etc. Same thing, like the same example, like what data can do. As pointed earlier, data can make innovators run faster, and innovators in this case may not be incumbent. So it's not that only the automotive guy can create an automotive vehicle, or only the banking guy can create fintech innovations, etc. And it's not the best mobile company can make best of the Apple iPhones out of it. It might just come from a laptop maker for that matter. So, and the Tesla is a very good example of it, right? So this is not just, I would say, if I'll just look at from this topic perspective, it's the car basically. It's almost like a mobile phone, right? Versus the other company cars, right? So a lot of times the traditional companies have just pushed the cars, and there's a lot more data is known about the car by the service provider as well as maybe consumers. And brands were completely out of it. So they could possibly do the best of the cars, but maybe if you look at all these brands, they vary based on for the service aspect of it. Maybe somebody will have better service, somebody may not have better service, and end of the day, they still may not have service at par with, let's say, Tesla. So what really happens is with the connected ecosystem, and there are some interesting patterns also with Tesla and some of these electric vehicles. A typical car will generate maybe 8 to 10 times more data than a family using let's say people of 4 people using mobile phone for the whole day long, right? So the number of data points that this generate it's humongous. And obviously these data points can later on be used for innovations of not just the next car or the next design of a car, etc., but entire service design aspect of it, remote maintenance of it, right? So you don't need to actually be physically taking the car to the service station, but you might just say, somebody might just auto repair. It's almost like an auto update of your mobile application. Somebody can update your car to, let's say, from car 1.2 to 2.2 kind of model. That's possible because everything is controlled through a kind of a data linked pipes, right? But again, at the same time, why it becomes innovation? Because suddenly the guy who designed the car can also design the maintenance cycle, maintenance plan or service plan of that particular car. Consumer product life cycles. So you just don't define the product only for consumption, but also you design every aspect from a consumer as well as for the entire product life cycle of that interacting with the consumer. And also consumables. So maybe consumables in the car, if this guy is playing certain music, because it's also the mobile phone connected car, if he's playing more music, maybe you can actually throw in, let's say, let's say service packs of musics and to this particular consumer. Somebody else might be watching podcast of some design innovations, etc. He can be throwing that content. So consumables can also be designed, and that's another interesting thing. A lot of many innovations are not always the primary innovation. They're also secondary innovations, right? So consumables can be an interesting innovations pattern from a data perspective. If you get that data back, can you make a consumables around it, right? And this quickly just wanted to touch upon here, and address like Amazon Lex, a good example is because of this new data. What is happening? It's products and the distribution supply chains, right, which is a traditional aspect, is changing its form to more like platforms or wrappers or applications, ecosystems. And I'll take an example of it. Let's say, for example, Amazon Alexa. Yes, it's for somebody it's a music product, somebody it's a home entertainment, somebody it's a problem solver, or somebody it's for housewife it is a maybe cooking guide. So it becomes suddenly like a home platform, right? Or not just that, Alexa can also control your lights and switches now because they open their APIs, etc. So products started becoming platforms, right? Or they are interconnected through some common gateway kind of model. Second thing is wrappers and apps, right? And that is a very interesting example. Look at Amazon as a website today. Possibly the website or the app looks different to everybody because maybe what I consume, let's say I'm an electronic freak, so I might see lots of electronic products and gadgets, everything for me. Maybe my wife might see lots of food and grocery items there. So what really happened is Amazon suddenly started becoming only a wrapper, and the entire product proposition is started getting personalized. So you don't define which button comes first. Unlike of, let's say, Yahoo's and Google's of the world, traditionally, they said that everybody will do only search when they come to google.com, or when everybody only search a directory of Yahoo, etc. Versus products are becoming more intelligent here as wrappers and apps. Also ecosystems. So what really is happening, data is driving consumables. So it's like, for example, once you have a platform, the data might define, okay, maybe throw in more music to these people, or throw in more home cooking guides to these people, or throw in more electronics to this kind of set of people. So your products will become platform, and consumables, what you consume to a product is personalized, and data will define what you are going to consume. Even the usage and behavior, right? It's to some extent is controlled through data or the behavior of consumer. Example is WhatsApp. So WhatsApp today is like, it started like an SMS application on the cloud, or on the web, or on the internet, etc. But really look at how people have exploited it, right? So WhatsApp just become a communication wrapper now. You can do images, you can do conference call, you can do multiple things there. So suddenly the usage and behavior defined today's WhatsApp. So maybe they started as a simple SMS kind of killer internet application. But today it is like the usage defined is like, okay, it's a best of the communication tool for, it also becomes a group communication tool, etc. So a lot of these usage and behavior data, and now you'll see a lot of features getting built on WhatsApp to allow that to happen, right? Earlier they didn't have group calls, but now they have group calls because they just found people have started creating a lot of groups from communication perspective. And new behaviors will form. So new people who will come, new consumers to the economy, etc. They will follow certain of these new behaviors from a data perspective. So that's, I think, one quick thing I wanted to share from a transition of even the way you look at innovations. The opportunity for innovations, the scope of innovations has gone beyond the simple innovations, much beyond life cycles. And some of the innovations definitely can become platforms and wrappers, or even ecosystem at some point of time. last but not least, this is the last slide. So just to kind of summarize it, also like data is everywhere. As an innovator, we have to look for the data. It's typically in 99% of the cases we have seen, like any innovation or any idea we're thinking right now, always you will always find primary, direct, indirect data points which can support or kind of tell you why that innovation may not make sense, or maybe the time has not come. Data across life cycle. So obviously data is not available only from a product perspective, but data is available across the life cycle. So you as an innovator may not just use the data, but you might also create a data so that it supports you design or define your innovations or extend your innovations across the life cycle product, not just creating a simple innovation itself. Then trends and patterns, very important, because you might not see a lot of times data may not give you nowadays details like, okay, you know what, look at blue color and it will work, right? Or look at, let's say in summer, everybody will start going, let's say silk, right? But and that's, you will see lots of fuzzy and trend and pattern related data. So it's important, how do you as an innovation leverage trends and patterns? A very important aspect from a data perspective, especially as a new data. Earlier data was very precise. Okay, like Indian, if there are 3 flags, colors in flag, people are very happy. If I put saffron, people might like it. If I put some kind of a India flag, people might adopt it. Put Ganesha, people adopt it. Those kind of things. But nowadays it's a little bit of a trend and pattern centric. Definitely, data is connected. So very important is your data is connected throughout the ecosystem. It is not one-time usage, and it's also connected with multiple touch points. You might not get data directly from your own product or innovations. You might get that data from mobile connection possibly, or you might get it from a third-party cloud, etc. So the connected data ecosystems is very important to look at. And most important is data has life. So you cannot innovate today with a data of year 2000, right? So, and same thing, in fact, even current time, if you look at right now. So like we are sitting right now in the current times, and maybe the Corona, COVID times, many innovations will come and will last till the vaccine comes. So the data is created today, used today, exploited today, matured today, but when the vaccine comes, maybe the innovations will have different life cycle, right? So, and that's a good example to also connect back that data has life. And that's why innovations cannot wait. And that's going back to the same thing as I started earlier. We meet many innovators saying that I have got a good idea, and if I get funding, I can do it. Or if I get this, I can do it. But what really I would suggest is everything has a life and time. And same thing goes with data. If you are innovation today, you're sitting on some idea and it's backed by certain data, I would say that innovation, that data will change. Like I cannot launch black and white TV today, but it was a very good example. Let's say great innovation, let's say in 1985, 80s, right? So that data will prove them that even black and white TV might work, but today it doesn't even make sense. So I think life of a data is very important. And same thing, I think that's also important, like when you are basing your innovations and you want somebody to back you up from a market as a friend, philosopher, a guy who's manufacturing, if you go to take the innovation to a distributor, can you distribute my product, etc. Your data has to be latest data. I cannot say, you know what, I make this product and I just found that in 2006, people made 50% margins on this particular product. People are not going to buy that or distribute that product. They would say, it's just too late a product right now. You may not make that margin because it's that 15-year-old data, right? So I think data definitely has life, which is one of the important things, because, and this we see day to day from our experience point of view. A lot of people say, many people come with innovation, but data is traditionally old, like some trend of 2011, and then referring back in that way. They try to convince, but it's very hard for the people to convince, because mostly I think data is available for most of the aspects. And these 4, I think, pillars define like your innovations. If you look at what data can define, so what product to do, which innovation might work in the market. So what of the product itself can be defined by data. How is this product? How should I build this product? Was also defined by data, right? Where this product will be used, like who are my consumers, target addressable market, etc. Also, data can tell you, like if you're making a product today, is enough data available to know which market it might work, which consumer it might pick it up, and also who from a consumer demographic perspective, It's enough, I think. So it's very hard to say today in today's world that I got innovation and people will adopt it and not no data. There are pockets of innovations like that, but they're really like very, very few. Otherwise, it's more like a derivative product. And if you can answer what, how, where, and who with data, actually just assume for you are up to something which is very meaningful and might scale in the market very well, or at least it will have greater appreciation from consumers. So just, I think this would have given you, so that this is the last slide, would have given you a good understanding, possibly in terms of how the data is playing an interesting role across the design. And we could see very good successful examples of usage of data. And going back to my first slide here, like you can now relate, if Tesla was defined in data 1.1 model, how it would change. Or let's say, look at a typical IoT device, let's say connected washing machine or a air conditioner, which possibly you're managing through your mobile phone or smart TVs. If you take data 1.0, would that output be a smart TV or not? So I think that's an exercise I would leave it to you guys. Take a new product and just map it to the data 1.0. Would you have done it in data 1.0 model? Would that be output or not? I think it's an interesting exercise for most of the innovators to do. We have done it many times, and that's where data 2.0 becomes more interesting, more important. And it touches to the innovators greatly, because innovation, validation of innovation is done by data. And this becomes an interesting vehicle for you to kind of get your innovations to the market more earlier and get more backings. With that, I would wish best of luck to all the people. Would be happy to take few questions.
Thank you so much. Yes, we've got loads of questions pouring in. Before we take those,
okay.
Thank you so much for actually putting in, together the slides. Very meaningful inputs and very relevant for the world today, right? It's an entirely new world order forming in. So to be able to understand how data is definitely going to be, used for new innovation, because that's your starting point. One, data and its availability. Two, in terms of how to analyze it. Three, that's when you start your innovation journey from, provided that I think you are into more of a ideation mode and then moving into product design, which luckily, I guess in your journey, it's been, you've studied, mechanical engineering, then you've done your MDes in product design. So right from the beginning, you've actually been a all-in-all product guy, and then, worked in various corporates, again in leadership roles, and now move to entrepreneurship. So it's like a perfect journey for you to, capture all your insights into these 45 minutes. Thank you so much for your time. My request to you would be that, given the questions pouring in, do we have your permission to sort of extend the timeline so that all questions can be answered?
Yeah, we can do about 15 minutes more if that works.
Sure. So we'll combine a few of the relevant questions and we'll take it on from there.
Sure.
Just a minute. Yeah. So let's start with what do you suggest a startup in the process of taking a product from 0 to 1 and doesn't have any data with respect to consumers when there is enough data present in the market already? What would you suggest to such a startup?
First of all, I think practically, maybe you don't have direct data, but you can always have indirect data. That's always possible. So, and it's actually also happened to, let's say, in products like Fitbit, right? Fitbit, when they created a Fitbit as a product which is wearable, obviously you would say that maybe the data of a typical, let's say, handle wristwatch might not be relevant at all, right? Or just looking at the guys who might be cautious about their health and wellness, again, may not be the great example, right? So how do we match that up together, like wristwatch, their price point versus now the entire new realm of consumer awareness about health and wellness? It's important. So I would say maybe the context of the question might also define what is the innovation. My guess is, if not direct, there's enough indirect data available from a startup perspective or a new product or innovation side. The second one also, I would say, there are always this concept like MVP, minimum viable product, or a POC, proof of concept kind of a thing. You can always do that. Like if let's say there is not direct or indirect data available, you might actually want to create a product and then put it in the market. with, let's say, first 50, 100 customers. What has also happened because of the new economy right now, it's very easy to get customers. Like somebody sitting at home for a blog can get audience, right, through Facebook or Instagram marketing. So you might be better off creating certain kind of POC and taking to customers. But I would still say if you are aggressive and innovator and really thinking of a business out of the innovation, you will find enough or more data, if not the sectorial data or trend level data to back your innovations. You might not, for example, like going back to the same Fitbit example, nobody would have sent a data saying that, you know what, if somebody wears a watch which can give you heart rate, bit rate, and let's say the steps, meters, etc., it will work. That data will not exist, right? But there'll be some trends that, okay, enough, there are suddenly we have find from 2010 to 12 time frame, let's say 30% of people, general audience, have started becoming health and wellness cautious, right? Then suddenly they will say, you know what, wristwatches is still used by so many people. So you might have mashed up these 2-3 data points and create a hypothesis around it. And if the hypothesis is very interesting, people also invest in it, or at least will get a backing. So I would say, summarizing it shortly, I would say you would have, if not direct, indirect data. And the good example, as you rightly pointed, because there is no data available, definitely the trend will be available, trend as a pattern. So you might, the innovation can be saying that, oh, a lot of variables are coming. Can I create variables around, let's say, spectacles for that matter, right? It's a natural extension of possibly variables doing something more. And that's how I would answer this question right now.
So indirect data coupled with mentorship, let's say?
Yeah, I think indirect mentorship is a secondary aspect, right? If the entrepreneur thinks that my innovation, I can take it to mentor, because mentorship is yes, no question still, right? If somebody comes to me saying that, can you mentor my innovation? I'm going to ask the same question. Why do you think it will become bigger? Because practically, like, unless you are a brother, sister, whatever it is, it's harder to get mentorship that way. Mentors are also looking for some kind of ROI out of the time which they're going to spend. Right? So I would say it's important that the innovation in it itself should have data backing it up. But we can look at a specific use case later on if required.
Sure.
Yeah.
In the new age of data, how do you see data-driven landscape versus data-informed landscape for innovation and design and decision-making?
Okay. So if I just think data-driven landscape versus data
informed.
Okay. So I think to verifying, I don't differentiate much. Okay. Because if you are informed about data, you can take a decision about data, right? You can decide. You can decide. So one is more like an input and one is output, right? So you might be informed about, let's take an example, right? If you might be informed about a lot of data about, let's say, COVID, right? But not everybody in this forum is going to suddenly, because almost everybody knows the same data, right? News channels, everybody, all these lots of apps are democratically available for everybody. But that doesn't mean that people are going to take decision based on the data, saying that tomorrow onwards, everybody is going to make a, let's say, mask or something, right? So I think it's a cycle of a process. The way I understand the question, at least, that for innovator is he should be informed about the data. The sources of the information are more important nowadays because they can be more versatile sources compared to the traditional models. And second one is what of those sources he can take to data-driven decisions is very important. And not every data needs to be kind of basically every input has to create a product out of it, because otherwise you'll make like Swiss knife kind of a thing product, right? Because one, let's say, keychain for somebody, one lighter for somebody, and this single product. Nowadays, the world is not typically looking for Swiss knives. They're looking for simple applications like a Twitter, simple, like one simple module, but massive. So I would say one is more of an input. The second is output. That's a differentiation if you look at. Not every input has to be converted into actions and outputs.
True. Can you touch upon data security? So, for example, Shobh Mukherjee would like to know that how important is data security in this whole process of innovation, with so much hacking in every field of data. So how do we tackle that?
Okay. So I think at least today's topic, just to kind of touch upon, today's topic is not related to data security. So I can spend much more time on data security and the personally identified data information, etc., policy making, etc. But I would say, just simply from today's discussion is we are consuming data for our innovations. The output is innovation. The output is not sharing the data itself. So in this current discussion, we are not taking, for example, if you, let's say there is ABC data when we get, we're not going to just print that data and give it to the market, right? So for example, we don't actually take all the, let's say I'm a, let's say IoT device company, or I'm creating a new IoT device, let's say Amazon Alexa, and because Alexa needs a login password anyway, and including our Wi-Fi password. Now I cannot just say, look, you know what, I'm going to make it public, right? So I think as an innovator, I think at least this, if I touch, keeping the today relevant to the topic, I think data security and all these aspects do not come into picture to larger extent, because you will consume the data, you read the data, you have access to data, because as an innovator, you are supposed to have access to data. It's very unlikely that Facebook doesn't know your login ID, right? It knows. The only thing is it cannot print and produce it outside the market. You can create trends out of it and then leverage it for your business. So, but that's Siddhangan, I think very important aspect will be responsible usage of the data. And I think that's where the innovators have to be really worried about. And that's why we've seen lots of cases coming that innovators, because of larger companies or becoming like a little bit not cautious about data handling, we see data is passed through, right? Hacking is a different aspect altogether. It is not, the innovator has not created any problem. It's somebody hacked, right, back in the backend servers and to make that data public. Innovator himself had no intent of publicizing the data, but somebody hacked to kind of push that data out. So I would just say, you consume data, create your trends and patterns and models from innovation perspective. And as an innovation driver or a owner of a product, and also be responsible about your data. And if you just have that responsibility had, a lot of questions will answer that what you are not going to pass to the consumers, or you will not get some blunt terms. Like for example, let's say, take an example, let's say you click an ad of washing machine on some website, like the washing machine was, let's say 17,000 rupees. You cannot throw in a advertise or a push notification to that user, you know what, here is the washing machine for you at 20% discount, and I can deliver it right now, just call me and get it done. So you have to put it as a trend. And so that is a responsibility handling example as an innovator, I would say. So to the topic, I would say not to worry too much about data handling, because you're reading the trends and using it for product rather than actually throwing it, the data out from a security perspective. Hacking is a completely different aspect altogether. It is not done by innovators, or the innovators at least not intend to do that. It is done by third party.
Sure.
Yeah.
At Multiply Ventures, since you mentioned that there are about 30 plus early stage investments, which of those investee companies do you see leading, now in the current COVID scenario? Is there any company, any case study that you'd like to touch upon who's doing something really out of the ordinary, trying to combat the crisis?
Yeah, I think, we have a portfolio of retail education as well as some of the fintech companies.
Right.
And if you look at from a portfolio perspective, fintech and edutech is not much impacted. In fact, it is actually growing faster because a lot more time is available for teachers as well as kids at home right now. So edutech, both so few of our edutech portfolio companies are doing pretty well. Then second one, I think, is also fintech, because people want to manage their funds, and obviously because the March pressure, etc., people wanted to close their books, etc. So some of these payable, receivable companies and open banking companies or neo banking companies are doing pretty well right now. And I think, so my view right now, I can do more of a sectorial view, and I'll touch upon a few of the innovations also.
Sure.
So generally, like the businesses which are not physically operating out in the market, and which are pure play digital businesses, and which connects consumer. So typically businesses which do not move people or goods and do not have another third party like logistics that's required, have not seen much of a dip from a innovation perspective. That's it. And then we have some impact portfolio, I would say, not positive, but negative impact portfolio, where we had some direct brand to consumer kind of products, But given they were in fashion, what really happened is they quickly pivoted their businesses, started making, let's say, PPEs for COVID times. So they had entire supply chain distribution created for fashion, clothing, etc. So they just reverted quickly and taken an opportunity, because same floor, same stitching, etc. is required. Only material of, instead of microfiber, what they're using PP kind of material, and they are doing pretty good. Obviously, the margins, they cannot charge, let's say, 40% margin currently. They are running on a lower margin, but at least the impact from a business perspective is taken care, because they just remolded to the COVID time. Same thing on a sustainability products right now, we see good traction. So, and same, I think not just our portfolio, but otherwise also, if you look at a lot of e-commerce companies, right, they just remolded themselves saying that we are essential supply companies now, right now, because people will consume food. I think that's another example I would specifically say here.
Sure. Thanks. So we've got Mithul Kumar Mehta wanting to know what are the key parameters one must consider while looking to innovate. Can you highlight some innovation which have already taken place in response to fight COVID-19? I believe this also sort of got partially answered right now by one of your investee companies, but if you'd like to add to it, most welcome.
No, I think, see, there, my view is, and because the current times are so, in a way, so you will see a lot of chaotic innovations right now. So it's like a more of a structured chaos, I would, if I had to call it as. So innovators are thinking in a structured manner. They have enough data right now in the market, at least whatever we call it as data so far. But it's the innovation, distribution, manufacturing is all a little chaotic, because people are at home and then they have to get remotely developed and those kind of things. Maybe the guy who's innovating, nobody in the world knows that he's an essential supply of goods guy. So he may not be giving it a pass of a innovation, etc., to kind of manufacture that particular product. But I do see there are interesting innovations. I think like the entire open source open source ventilators, right? A very interesting model. In fact, a couple of startups which we actually met, they were making like low cost home ventilators. But now you would see like those companies, we are thinking that they might be really great companies because they could really do very well. But suddenly, because of COVID, there are tens of such companies right now in the market, right? So it became like and a lot of, even from outside the world, outside India, many people are given open source ventilator manufacturing, also almost like we would open source code, their entire manufacturing process, CAD designs, everything is available right now. So I think democratic innovation has really taken a large, I think, place right now in the current model. But I've seen interesting innovations, I think, across the world right now, and also in India. Like, for example, those tunnels, right? Sprinkling tunnels, right?
Right.
I've not seen anywhere across the world, but India, I think we just suddenly started mass manufacturing that innovation. Second thing is, I think, and again, as we said, the innovation is not always about the product which you make or a application or website which you make. It also could be a supply chain aspect of it. It also could be infrastructure aspect of it. And the good example of is Indian Railways, right? Indian Railways, because obviously railway is not used. They have beds and everything facility, but can it really be repurposed as, let's say, the isolation spaces, right? So I think that's another innovation, I would say, from an India perspective. A lot of many other countries were struggling. We have seen China trying to set up, let's say, hospitals in, let's say, 10 days, 8 days, whatever it is. Half the time people have in India created those kind of facilities in India, which are not just available, but can be moved also. Let's say suddenly you see pandemic happening in X place, you can actually move 5 train bogies there, right? Or 5 trains there, and you have enough capacity created there. So I think that's one I think innovation in terms of Kerala has done a good job in terms of food supply chain. They have created a unique model of supplying the food. I think they in fact, if you look at their data also, like being the number 1 destination, I think they just completely gone down. I think 9th or 10th place right now from a perspective. And a lot of it goes to this kind of ideation, which they have done really from even at a smallest of the pieces, isolating different kind of people, doing the entire supply chain is managed by government there. So everybody gets food at home, etc. So I think some of these pockets of innovation, I would say it's very hard to say one specific innovation for India. Maybe the sprinkler is a good example, because no place in other anywhere in the world they were using these sprinklers. We used to have this in marriages, right? In marriages, you'll see a lot of these sprinklers, right? We'll have these perfumes, right? When you get, so suddenly they were repurposed, for some of these things, or let's say these agriculture sprinklers were suddenly deployed. So extended innovations really has taken an interesting space right now.
Yeah. So most of data is just predictions or classifications. How can one connect data plus user plus context?
Okay. So I think I would not like agree to the first statement. Like most of data is prediction or more like a because see, it's about how you read the data, right? And just seems like because as an innovator, right? As I said, that's the data is everywhere, and data is also available in multiple pockets. It's very important for us to use what data for what, right? Now, so if I take an example of a product right now, for example, let's say take the Fitbit itself, right? So maybe the input data to make that product, whether it is viable or not, is some different data. But once it is deployed, let's say if I had to look at who's going to distribute my product, right? Maybe possibly that time they would have definitely looked at who are the which are the distributors in India or in anywhere in the world doing a very good job of maybe either mobile phone distribution or a typical wristwatch distribution, because possibly both the distribution chains will help them anyway. So we have just suddenly started leveraging that distribution. Third is possibly, I think, from a user usage perspective, again, we might have looked at the healthcare data. How many people have weighing machines at home, right? Or where on Amazon weighing machines are bought, for that matter, right? That's an indirect data because you're buying weighing machines on, let's say, Amazon, or how many people are buying those walker or the treadmills, etc. Or which city has more treadmills deployed. And a lot of this data available from the gyms and especially the large chains of gyms. They have this data, which city has more treadmills compared to other cities, etc. So you know that these trends are available. So you know so if you look at connect all these dots right now, you have data supporting your innovation that we should get into or do it or not. Second one is who's going to distribute my product, which is coming from a typical traditional mobile as well as the electronic product distribution, all well as wristwatch distribution. Third is from a consumption perspective, who are my consumers, right? So which city I should be doing more marketing. That's from my go-to-market perspective. Price point also another thing possibly you can look at. So price point has to be between, let's say, a wristwatch and a treadmill kind of a model. So some benchmark from price point perspective. So if you connect all these dots, it possibly answers your question across the chain.
Sure, thanks. So again, in terms of how vast our country is, how are different languages and varied cultures playing a part in data? And with voice assistance, will it be feasible and affordable for the rural people?
It's already, I think the cost of, I think doing a voice commands is much cheaper than building a product and distributing in different languages. So for example, if there's no voice and I have to make a mobile phone with, let's say, different kind of letters, right? And then it's not always a 26 letter or 46 alphabets, what India has in different vernaculars. So the cost of doing a vernacular product physically within this thing is much higher compared to a soft switch or soft connect product. That's then, and I think again, as an innovation, I would say there are many startups already in the market which talks about, which do not, so you don't need to do a vernacular product, your interaction yourself. There are companies which actually just like almost like a plug and play. Which you can say that, what, my product needs these 10 inputs and I want to, because the 10 inputs might just mean 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or ABCD for you. But that A might mean in Tamil something different, Marathi something different, and somewhere something different. As far as you get to know A, you just have to fire that particular command for a product. And that's where the entire plugin of the vernacular content and this thing comes in. And these are available in the market. There are a bunch of, I think, companies right now doing a very fantastic job of kind of collating not just vernacular language, but also even accents, because many times like Marathi has maybe have like 15 different variations in Maharashtra itself. Tamil has at least about, Tamil has more actually. So even the accents are taken care right now.
Sure.
Yeah.
So Bhushan, from access to data, right, to actually formalizing the innovation, for it to actually reach the final stage, what, according to you, is the usual timeline?
very hard
from
to
point
say.
A to point B. Yeah. But
No,
generally, from your experience, last 1 year as an entrepreneur, and across your various corporate experiences, what would you say
very. So maybe I'll bucketize this to some extent. So if you're talking about like a typical digital product, let's say, and that's where we take more focus right now. Now, we have more focuses on that aspect. If it's a typical online or let's say app-led or a digital kind of a play, you from an idea to a prototype or idea to a simple like first customer, you may be looking at within 3 to 6 months time, because the first product for a first startup. And that is getting shorter, just to kind of share also. But again, I think just from a trend perspective, I would say what really is happening in the life cycle of a product itself is changing. So if you look at, let's say, 1990 to 2000, 2000 to 2010, 2010, let's say 11 to 20, just look at a mobile phone, how we were using mobile phone. Maybe the first mobile phone people used for 5-6 years, second mobile phone for 2-3 years. Now we're possibly changing mobile phone every month, or not every year, or possibly, or every 2 years, right? So what is happening that your innovation, the usage on the death of a product or innovation, especially in many of these kind of aspects of products or innovations, is getting shorter. And that creates lots of pressure on your innovations to do innovations faster. So you don't have, let's say, year-long times right now to do a proof of concepts. And that's why the timelines will become more and more shorter. But the larger Uber trend is very important, that the life cycle of product is drastically going shorter and shorter. Or if they are longer, then they're bound to be platform. Like Amazon is there today because it's a platform. It doesn't say that I will always keep selling you a washing machine on the first page, right? Because everybody gets a different Amazon for that matter. So typically platforms like TV is a product, but it's a platform to play different kind of channels and content. But content itself may die. For example, maybe you were a Star TV fan for 2011 to 12, but now you might be completely Netflix, right? So some of that content is a product which will die quickly. So so I think that aspect is very important from a timeline perspective.
So existing players or active businesses take shorter time to reinvent with whatever that they can manage, compared to, let's say, again, first time starters, which may require, let's say, a 3-month to a 6-month or a more cycle, again, depending on the credibility of the founding team, let's say.
To some extent, yes. But then I would say this, let's say Samsung as a company wanting to do an app versus somebody sitting outside wanting to do an app, maybe the lead time for them will be same. Right.
Okay.
But when it comes to physical product, we have to define the molds and everything. Maybe time is a little bit more. Samsung can do a faster job versus somebody else because he has to still figure out the entire infrastructure ecosystem of manufacturing, whereas they already figured out their infrastructure ecosystem.
Yeah. So first was about timelines. Now this one is about funding. Just an idea. And the number of rounds.
See, my view to the fund is basically you can. So if you really have a large consumer market, you can raise as many funds as you want. There's no limit to the fund which you raise, but and it's a very subjective question from one sector to sector, idea to idea, etc. Also, and funding is not only so people don't fund your idea, people fund people, right? Correct. So so it's not about a lot of times it's about can you really crack it, right? It's about the founder more than idea. So that's one. But really what happens, I think you need to understand the stages. So when you start an idea, because you cannot say that, let's say you create an idea as a proprietary business, etc. And you have, let's say 50 crore business already created. And then you say, I'm going to raise now angel round. Angel rounds are typically 1 to 2 crores. So they won't get anything out from that company if it's already 50 crore company, right? Correct. So there is a timing across a life cycle of innovation. When you do what series of funds and also what pocket of fund. Like for example, a lot of COVID ideas may not get direct VC funds because nobody knows whether this idea, because VC funds are looking for, let's say 3 to 5 year horizon of timeline. So if I invest in this COVID idea after vaccination, that idea might not even be relevant, right? So, but maybe an impact fund might want to do it, right? Sure. Or a debt fund might want to do it. So there are different pockets of monies and different stages of money raises across startup. So it's a little bit of a crisscross of both. You have to think from a raise perspective.
Yeah, and that would require a separate webinar on funding matters.
That's not just webinar. I think it's also different science altogether. It has a lot to do with the chemistry of a founder than a physics and maths of a innovator idea.
True. So here's the last question. This one is about data innovation. How well we can couple or integrate with AI, printed intelligence, so to say IoT, IoE, IOC, etc.
So is that the statement of question? Because I'm not sure whether he's talking about can I create an innovation company out of data, or is that a question? I didn't get exactly.
So I guess we can take that one offline then. In the interest of time, because we've pretty much reached your extended 15 minutes as well.
Yeah.
And a couple of more questions, but we'll take them offline.
Sure.
So for more questions, participants, please reach out to me offline on LinkedIn. We've shared the the link in the chat mode earlier. And I'd like to thank Bhushan for his time and sharing such valuable insights. Thank you so much, Bhushan, for taking out time, putting together the slide deck, and patiently answering all the questions coming your way.
No problem. And thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, everybody, and take care. Be at home. Do not go out.
And a round of thanks also to our participants for joining us today. I'd like to invite you all to our next webinar. Please save the date. It's tomorrow. It's 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. again. Same link, same password. Our guest speaker is Mr. Nikhil Malhotra. He's the Global Head of Innovations at Tech Mahindra Maker Labs, who will talk about emerging technologies and innovations. So please register soon. And for those who tuned in late, this curated series on innovations will feature a variety of industry thought leaders, speakers like Mr. Bhushan Patil, who are a part of the MIT ID innovation ecosystem. For those who tuned in late, again, MIT stands for the 4-decade-old Maharashtra Institute of Technology. ID stands for MIT's 15-year-old Institute of Design. And the one-year innovation program is the latest offering of MIT ID, which aims to create a new breed of comprehensive innovators. So connect with us. We've shared all our social channel links up ahead in the chat mode. Do tune in into Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Audio Boom for all the other earlier webinars that you may have missed out on. Thank you once again, Bhushan. And thank you everyone for joining in today. Stay connected, stay safe, stay home, and keep innovating every day. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.